Having covered the effect of the triple Capricorn conjunction on his chart at the time of the election, as well as throughout 2020, and mentioned that that is very important in determining the outcome being negative, I now come to the Neptune transit, which I think is actually an even bigger reason why he's going to lose. And it's because, as tricky as Saturn can be, coming from the 12th in Cancer, which is a weak position. By the way, if you ever doubt the weakness of Trump's Saturn, just pay attention to his level of discipline, which is basically zero, and self-restraint, particularly strategic self-restraint, is one of the best qualities of Saturn, and he has none of that. But as tricky as that can be, you notice that Saturn conjoins Venus, but other than that, then it sextiles the midheaven, which is actually very nice. It supports the MC, and it really doesn't get a lot of heat from anywhere in the chart. There is a Jupiter square, and this is partly why he is constantly exceeding and over-expanding and over-optimizing and doing his hyperbolic messaging thing. But it's not terrible. It's a workable square. And the point to all that is that the Saturn is not a horrific planet in that sense. And I've said in prior videos that in this chart, the worst planet is actually Neptune, because in addition to being in a station, it makes a square to his Mercury and opposes Eris, and so you get a T-square, and this becomes the most vulnerable part of the chart. And what this means is wherever this Neptune goes, it's going to cause trouble. And in fact, it's interesting to note that he got elected when Neptune was trining Mercury back in 1516. And so, ostensibly that's a positive aspect. Trine, something good happens. I've always felt that winning the election was a trap, walking into a trap, given the tremendous confluence of difficult planets that followed that 2016 election, and that basically covers 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. In other words, a very bad idea, a very bad investment. Someone could have said to him, don't do that, because it's the equivalent of finding a huge bag of money on the street and then finding out that it's mob money and that you're going to go to jail or that you're going to be killed or something terrible is going to happen. So he gets in on the trine. And so here we have an example of a planet that even in a trine can cause a problem for you. It's a trine that is actually a false trine. You have to be careful with it. But now it's not a trine. Now it's a full-blown square, right? We've got it in a situation where it's squaring the moon and squaring the sun for all intents and purposes, particularly at the stationary point in around the summer solstice. And because this is the 8th sign, the sign of death, and it's a difficult sign, difficult house, sign/house, the 8th, right? The house of death, the house of other people's money, the house of debt. So you're almost always going to get a bad outcome with an alignment like this. And then you have to throw in that in addition to that, you've got his finances are in serious peril. We've already heard that the Supreme Court, for all their apparent right-wing leaning tendencies, appear to be reluctant to give him a pass on the disclosure of his financial records, which he is trying to claim full immunity to. A totally absurd argument, which if the court were to agree to, would set terrible precedent. And so it's very likely they're going to deny him that particular request, and that comes well ahead of the election. It comes in June, July, which could be incredibly negative. So that's one aspect to it. The other aspect is death itself. The man is dealing with death. He talks about, we shouldn't do so much testing, because if you test, then basically you get results which make me look bad. Sure, okay, but how do you explain the deaths? How do you explain 90, 100,000 people, probably more, are going to go down? And it's basically his fault. He responded to this pandemic in a horrifically bad way. And now we're all paying for it. But he's paying for it too, because it's in his chart. And so he's dealing with that topic, right? Now, I have to add, by the way, and I didn't mention it too much in the last video, I've said it in prior videos, these Capricorn planets connected to health house, right there. Another health house, right here. The third one, if you want to find the third health house, the death house. This house here, you find surgeries, you find diseases, you find all kinds of problems, including death. He's got Neptune there. Pretty risky stuff. The man is walking around, in my opinion, he's a bit of a time bomb. He thinks he's immune to everything. I wouldn't be so sure. He's at risk himself of that. Mind you, if he's able to avoid it, then he has to face it in regard to the effect it's having on the country, which I've said in prior videos as well. Political figures, public figures, tend to live topics often through the broader context, such as Barack Obama in 2008, 2009, intense health aspects that were translated to the difficulties in getting the Obamacare legislation passed. And so with Trump, it's the theme of that house. But now, finally, and probably most importantly, Neptune is a planet that connects to celebrity and popularity. It's as though the person's dream is the dream of the collective, or the collective sees their aspirations and their dreams through them, right? So when Neptune was trine over here, the collective, the overall popularity went with him. Now it's square. This is classic for loss of popularity, which, again, doesn't have to be everybody. People will often say, I can't believe the people that follow this guy, how can millions of people follow him? That's just the way it is in America at the moment, and probably for some time to come. There's a lot of division. The country's polarized. All that has to happen is he loses a percentage, even a small percentage, because even though he says he won a historically enormous, ginormous, incredible landslide, that's totally untrue, like many of the things he says. He won by the skin of his teeth. He barely got in there. So the margins are very, very tight. He won because of less than 80,000 votes spread across 3 Midwestern states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. That is going to be a really tough act to follow, particularly running against someone like Joe Biden. And so this is at minimum the loss of enough popularity to then signify defeat, although it might be an even bigger chunk. I don't know. That will depend on many factors, over the next weeks and months. But either way, this Neptune indicates that it's going to be a drop in popularity. So added to all the other factors, it becomes a crucial cycle to be in a negative sense in 2020 when you are seeking re-election, which therefore I believe he will not succeed in doing.